Hello everyone, Mog here, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about my first successful crack on a Safelock, this CDL3 over here. So this took a little while and I made a lot of mistakes along the way, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those and kind of explain what the process looked like. So I mainly base my techniques off of the teachings in the course on YouTube, or series I should say, by Lock Manipulator called Safecracking for Everyone. So I started with this all wheels left kind of start to try and find a gate, and I ended up, after making a few mistakes and redoing a couple measurements and testing a couple different possible gate signatures, I ended up being fairly sure there was a gate at 80. I did a high-low test to confirm that, and I believed it to be on wheel 3. I then went on to try and do an all wheels right test to kind of confirm my finding, because I wasn't like super confident in this 80. And this kind of helped confirm that as well. So I decided to move on from that and assume wheel 3 was 80 and try and find my next number likely on wheel 2. And so this one I was doing wheel 3 left to 80 and then wheels 1 and 2 right. And here I was pretty sure I found a gate at 12, did a high-low test again, and was pretty sure I confirmed it. So I went on to basically do a test assuming these two numbers, and then tried pretty much every other number after that. And I went through all these, and I also tried to open the safe at each number, and I realized in hindsight I didn't actually really need to do the graph here. I could have just tried to open it at every other number. But I did that, and I didn't get an open. I'm pretty sure I ran through it all again because I was pretty confident in my first two numbers. But alas, no luck. So I wondered if I'd maybe mixed up which wheel the numbers were on, and honestly, looking back at this, I think I had my terminology of which wheel was which a little mixed up, and that is probably part of why I didn't get the open. I might have also not been quite close enough in kind of my dialing. So here I did a bunch more high-low tests to see if I could try and salvage my information and confirm that, which wheel some of these numbers were on. And at the end of this, I kind of realized that, I'd learned a bunch by the time I got here and realized I should probably just start over because I'm not sure I entirely trust some of my early measurements. So, and part of that was also I figured it would be easier to do this with some graph paper. So I started again, and I also tried something else here when I started this set of tests, or this set of graphs. And that was, instead of doing the all wheels left start, I decided to do wheel isolation. And I want to do this for two reasons. One, I noticed that the wheels seem pretty inconsistent on this lock, which meant there was a lot of noise for if, I would expect to find wheel 3 first, doing the first all wheels left test, find a gate for wheel 3. But I felt like wheel 1 and 2 were causing a fair bit of noise in that graph because they were also moving along with wheel 3. So I tried another technique that Lock Manipulator explains, and I'm sure many others know about, but that's where I learned it at least. And it's called wheel isolation, and the idea here is I leave wheel 1 and 2 at a fixed point and then only manipulate wheel 3. And I like this idea because it would take away the variance that wheel 1 and 2 might add into the graph, and it would take away that noise. So I tried wheel 1 and 2 isolated at 0, and then tested wheel 3 to generate this top graph. And as you can probably see, this graph is not a happy graph. I have one kind of significant abnormality, but it's going the wrong way. This is the opposite of a gate signature. So I thought, okay, maybe I just didn't pick a great isolation point for wheel 1 and 2. I'm going to try a different point. I decided 50. In hindsight, maybe I wouldn't have done... Well, I'll come back to this. But anyway, I decided to try 50 for wheel 1 and 2 and then try it again. And so I started at 50 at this point, just because from where the wheels were, that was kind of an easy point to start. And this time I got a very significant gate signature around 80. And I believe, let's see here, Yeah, so at this point, I was very confident. I was thinking of doing I could potentially do a test like Lock Manipulator explains, where I test with it at, let's say, 75, then 85, then 80, but I basically already did that by just completing other measurements. So at this point, I was very confident wheel 3 was 80. And this lines up with my findings from the previous graphs. I believed I had a gate at 80, and I thought it was wheel 3. So that's awesome. I also kind of clarify here, maybe it was more like 79.5. I had my girlfriend set this combination for me, and I instructed her how to do it, and maybe she wasn't exactly on 80 with the same precision I would be. But that's fine. I knew where the gate was. So then for my next set of tests, I decided to leave wheel 1 at 50 and spin wheel 2 right and have, oh yeah, wheel 1 left at 50, wheel 2 right, and then wheel 3 left to about 79.5, or exactly 79.5 is what I decided, because that felt like the middle of the gate, uh, even if the actual number was supposedly 79 or 80, as she intended at least. And I think I made a couple of mistakes here, but anyway, I went on to kind of do this graph, and there's two main things that kind of went wrong in this graph. One is, I think it wasn't until after the first little bit I realized, I got I got some very large bumps around 50 in some of my other graphs. And so I thought maybe I shouldn't actually use 50 for this number. Maybe I should use 45 just to avoid the potential of wheel 1 having a bump there that might uh, add more noise or lower the signal in my graph. And I also had another realization around 74 that I think I was actually dialing this graph somewhat incorrectly. I don't think I always had wheel 2 where I wanted it to be. And this happened because I was trying to be clever. I thought I had a faster way to dial it, and I was just wrong. I ended up just wasting a whole bunch of time. The other thing about this graph was that when I changed from 50 to 45, I think I might have only started doing that partway through, and I really ought to have just started the whole graph over. Because what ended up happening was I ended up getting to the end, and I thought, I ended up thinking that this 50 looks kind of like a gate signature, and I started, as you can see here, I think it was 49, and that was really the only gate-like signature I had. So I figured, okay, I'm going to go with that, and I started graphing it out, and eventually just decided to test all the combinations because I realized the graph isn't necessary. And I ended up doing this all through and didn't get an open, which made me realize, okay, sorry, I thought wheel 2 was 49. So yeah, I went through, didn't get an open, and I thought, okay, well that's a little peculiar. I must have messed something up with my wheel 2 graph, because I was fairly confident in wheel 3, and I realized I made some mistakes on wheel 2. I did try and go back to kind of confirm some of them, like when I went back to check around 49. And so, I figured, okay, I'm going to go back and check around this little bump here, and I'm going to make sure I do the calculations correctly, or sorry, the dialing correctly with wheel 1 definitely at 45, and actually doing the full dial for each number. And I got super lucky here and got an open on my first retest here, 45, 9, 80. So what I found after was, it turns out that this was actually the gate. I didn't notice it the first time, I think because I was still dialing at 50, and that was obscuring my graph. And you notice the signal looks kind of low. It was relative to what I've got over here. Didn't think it was the gate relative to that. And then it so happens, like normally what I think would have happened if I was less lucky, but doing things correctly, is I would have found a gate signature around 9 or 10, and then I would have went through to do my test, and eventually I would have gotten to 45 and I would have got the open. But I so happened to have my test value for 1 at 45 that I ended up getting the open right there. And so that ended up confirming the combination for me that worked, 45, 9, 80. So you can see here, I'll just show you that this is indeed the combination. There we go. And when I told my partner that I was pretty sure I'd cracked it, she confirmed for me that the combination she intended to set was 46, 11, 79. So it does make sense. I was off by roughly a number or two, or maybe she was when she dialed it. Hard to say for sure. But in any case, that did the trick, and I was able to get this lock open. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how I cracked my first safe lock. The kind of most important lessons I learned for anyone who's maybe hoping to learn from my many mistakes. First, really be sure you know what number you're dialing. I realize now, especially when I was starting, I maybe didn't have quite as good of an understanding of what I was doing. And I think more importantly, in some ways, I was kind of mixing up the way to refer to some of the wheels, and this was, which one was wheel 1 versus wheel 3, and this was causing me great amounts of grief. The second big thing is, for me, wheel isolation worked a lot better than like a kind of all wheels left start. And that might just be this particular lock. Maybe the wheels are a little less consistent than in maybe a better lock. Additionally, don't try to be fast. I probably would have gotten this open 2 hours sooner if I didn't mess up this graph by thinking I could dial it with a few less spins without dialing the whole combination every time. And the last thing was this decision on my first graph to change my isolation point was super huge. And so if you do try wheel isolation and don't get a gate signature, it's definitely worth trying a different isolation point. So yeah, there's the story of how I got my first safe lock open. Oh yeah, piece of paper, really great. Anyway, for anyone who took the time to watch, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.